The question of how the Bible came to be is truly intriguing and profound. The Bible is not just a book but a collection of sacred texts that has spanned millennia, profoundly influencing culture, religion, and society. The fact that it went through so many phases of writing, editing, translation, and selection raises questions about divine inspiration, historical authenticity, and human interpretation. Welcome to Sacred Stories. Today, we will unveil the story of how the Bible came to be. The Bible is the result of a long and complex process of composition, compilation, and canonization that developed over centuries. Here is a summary of its history. The history of the Bible begins with the oldest texts of the Jewish tradition, which form the Old Testament. These texts were written in Hebrew, with some parts in Aramaic. It is believed that Moses was the author of the first 5 books of the Bible, known as the Pentateuch or Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, around the 15th century BC. Other books, such as the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the writings, Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Songs, etc., were written over many centuries. These texts reflect the history, laws, poetry, wisdom, and prophecies of the people of Israel. Translation into Greek. The Septuagint, circa 250 to 100 BC. With the growth of Hellenistic culture, especially after the conquest of Alexander the Great, many Jews came to live outside of Israel and spoke Greek. To meet the needs of this Jewish diaspora, the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek. This translation, called the Septuagint, was made around the 3rd century BC in Egypt, and it is significant because it influenced the early church and is cited in the New Testament. The New Testament, circa AD 40 to 100. After the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, his teachings and actions began to be transmitted orally and later in writing. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are narratives of Jesus' life, written between AD 60 and 100. In addition to the Gospels, letters from Christian leaders, such as the Apostle Paul, were sent to the early Christian communities to guide them in the faith. These letters, known as epistles, along with the Book of Acts of the Apostles and Revelation, form the New Testament. Canonization of the Old and New Testaments, 2nd to 5th centuries. In the early centuries of Christianity, many texts circulated among Christian communities. There was a process of discernment to determine which books were considered inspired and authentic. The Old Testament had already been largely accepted by the Jewish community, although some disagreements over the inclusion of certain books, called deuterocanonical, remained between Jews and Christians. The New Testament began to take shape in the 2nd century. Churches and local councils, such as the Council of Carthage, AD 397, recognized the 27 books of the New Testament as canonical. This did not happen suddenly but involved debate and consensus over the centuries. Translation and dissemination of the Bible. The Vulgate, a Latin translation of the Bible made by Saint Jerome in the 4th century, became the official version of the Bible used by the Catholic Church for over 1,000 years. However, access to the Bible was limited, as manuscripts were copied by hand, often in monasteries. With the invention of the movable type printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in 1455, the first printed Bible was published, making the dissemination of the scriptures easier. Protestant Reformation and new translations, 16th century. During the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, leaders like Martin Luther promoted direct access to the scriptures. Luther translated the Bible into German, and versions in other languages began to emerge, such as the Geneva Bible in English. Protestant reformers also rejected the deuterocanonical books, adopting what is called the Protestant canon. The Catholic Church, on the other hand, reaffirmed the authority of the deuterocanonical books at the Council of Trent, 1546, establishing the canon of the Catholic Bible. Modern Bible and contemporary translations. Over time, new translations of the Bible were made to make it accessible to various cultures and languages. The King James Bible, 1611, for example, became one of the most influential translations in English. Archaeological discoveries. Discoveries such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, 1947, which contain Old Testament texts dating back to as early as 200 BC, confirmed the preservation and authenticity of biblical texts over the centuries. The Bible emerged as a collection of texts that were gradually recognized as inspired by God, encompassing a long history of development, oral transmission, writing, and careful selection. Its formation was a reflection of the faith and religious experience of Jewish and Christian communities, preserving central teachings for millions of people throughout history. The Bible is the result of a long and complex process of composition, compilation, and canonization that developed over centuries. Here is a summary of its history. The global expansion of the Bible. With European colonization and the advancement of Christian missions in the 17th and 18th centuries, the Bible was brought to new regions of the world, especially to Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Missionaries from various denominations, particularly Catholic and Protestant, worked to translate the scriptures into the native languages of these peoples. However, this expansion of the Bible was also closely tied to colonial objectives. While it was often a tool for education and spirituality, it was also associated with the imposition of Western cultures and values. This generated a mix of acceptance and resistance in various cultures. Bible societies and modern translations. With the increase in literacy and the desire to make the Bible accessible to all, Bible societies emerged in the 19th century, such as the British and Foreign Bible Society and the American Bible Society. The goal of these organizations was to distribute the Bible affordably and support translations into different languages. These initiatives contributed to a growing number of Bible translations, resulting in versions like the Revised Version, 1885, in English, and the Almeida Revista e Corrigida in Brazil, which became one of the most popular among Portuguese speakers. Translations based on new discoveries. The discovery of ancient manuscripts, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Codex Sinaiticus, led to a new wave of translations in the 20th century. These discoveries allowed scholars to compare ancient texts with modern versions of the Bible, resulting in more accurate translations based on the oldest manuscripts available. These advancements led to the creation of translations like the New International Version, NIV, and the Jerusalem Bible, which are widely used today. The Bible in the digital age. With the arrival of the digital age, access to the Bible has become even easier. Today, online platforms and apps like YouVersion allow people to read the Bible in hundreds of different languages on various devices. In addition, the Bible has been studied more extensively in academic settings, with disciplines such as archaeology, textual criticism, and history shedding light on the historical and cultural context in which the texts were written. Contemporary interpretations and divisions. Over the centuries, interpretations of the Bible have also generated divisions and debates among different Christian denominations and movements. In the 20th century, the Christian fundamentalist movement emerged in the United States, advocating for a literal interpretation of the Bible. On the other hand, liberal and modernist theologians began interpreting the texts more symbolically or critically, taking into account the historical and cultural context in which they were written. This has led to an even greater diversity of biblical understandings, reflecting the multiplicity of Christian traditions and their readings of the Scriptures. The Bible today, a living book. Today, the Bible remains the most translated and published book in the world, with versions in more than 3,000 languages and dialects. It is central to the faith of billions of people, influencing the culture, morality, and spiritual life of Christians and Jews around the globe. But more than a religious book, the Bible is also an invaluable source for historians, anthropologists, linguists, and literature students, studied for its cultural, historical, and linguistic value. The history of the Bible is a journey of faith, preservation, and transmission. From the ancient Hebrew manuscripts to modern digital translations, the Bible continues to be one of the most important texts in human history. It reflects not only the relationship between God and humanity, but also the evolution of the cultures, languages, and societies that helped preserve and spread it over millennia. What began as a collection of oral stories, laws, and prophecies has transformed into a text that has shaped civilizations, inspired movements, and continues to offer hope and spiritual guidance to millions around the world. My friend, if you got this far, thank you very much. If you like the video, leave your like, comment, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to be aware of our content.